3 a.m. Deep in the mountain quiet, miles from anywhere. They were jolted awake by a scream. Not distant, not an animal. A raw, human scream. Right outside of their camper. He pulls back the curtain, heart pounding, and there she is. The woman they couldn't shake, standing motionless in the moonlight, staring directly at their window. Their honeymoon was supposed to be about peace, but it turned into something else entirely. If you're drawn to those stories that linger, the ones that make you check your locks twice or glance over your shoulder on a quiet path, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the other side. Tonight, we head into the mountains, summer of 2016. A couple, finally married after 12 years together, decide to celebrate their honeymoon the same way their relationship began, camping. They weren't novices. They loved the outdoors, they knew their gear, and they knew their routines. But this time, though, they were going all out. 20 days, a long immersive trip into a mountainside campground they'd reach, far away from their everyday lives. They packed the camper, loaded up the dogs, and set off, leaving the familiar behind. When they arrived, it was everything they'd hoped for. Towering pine trees, that crisp, cool mountain air, the scent of wood smoke clinging to the breeze. They found their spot, they set up the camper, and cracked open a couple of cold ones, and then just breathed. That was it. The perfect start. Or so they thought. The first few days were idyllic, exactly as planned. They explored a little, met some fellow campers, swapped stories around evening fires, normal campground life, living an easy, comfortable life, until she showed up. They were sitting outside their camper, under a big pine, maybe playing cards, just relaxing. And suddenly, she was just there. Standing at the edge of their campsite. No sound of approach, no crunch of leaves or twigs. One moment the space was empty, the next she occupied it. "Can I pet your dog?" Her voice was flat, quiet, but it startled them. It startled the dogs even more. They erupted in a frenzy of barking. The husband, trying to be polite while grabbing collars, said, "No, sorry, they're a bit protective." But the woman, she didn't react. She didn't apologize for startling them. She didn't walk away. She just stood there. Her gaze was unfocused, drifting somewhere past them, not quite making eye contact. An unsettling stillness was about her. And after a long, awkward moment that stretched uncomfortably long, she turned and slowly walked away without another word. The husband watched her go. Strange, yeah, but he rationalized it. Maybe she was just socially awkward, mildly autistic. There's 50,000 different things that could have caused that. He'd encountered people before who had trouble with basic interactions, and he shrugged it off. You meet all kinds out camping, right? Everybody loves nature. Later that evening, though, he saw her again. Across the way, she was setting up a tiny, one-person tent. She wasn't putting it in an empty site. She was pitching it right inside another group's campsite. Definitely weird, an invasion of privacy and space, but again, maybe she knew them. Maybe there was an explanation. He decided not to dwell on it. He was wrong to dismiss it. Very, very wrong. The next morning, the husband headed for the campground showers, and he walked past her little tent, pitched awkwardly near the other campers. and she was sitting inside, the flap open, reading a book, looking perfectly normal. He took a shower and was on his way back, and he glanced at the tent again. This time it was zipped shut, but the fabric was moving, shifting from the inside. As he got closer, maybe wondering if she needed help or something, the zipper suddenly shot downward, and there she was, completely naked. She didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't try to cover up. Instead, she deliberately stretched, pushing her chest forward, letting out a very long, loud, exaggerated moan, right at the husband. He was floored. He didn't know what to do, so he did nothing. He just kept walking, eyes straight ahead, pretending he hadn't seen a thing. Back at the camper, he told his wife what happened. They were both creeped out, but they laughed it off. They chalked it up to a weird camping encounter that they could tell around campfires in the future and tried to put it out of their mind. But they would not be laughing much longer. That afternoon, needing to shake off the weird vibe, they decided to go for a hike. There was a trail starting right near the campground entrance. Scenic, easy, pretty quiet, so they grabbed their water, leashed the dogs, and they headed out. About halfway to the actual trailhead, before the path really plunged into the deeper woods, they stopped to take a few pictures. The view was nice and it was peaceful. And that's when they saw her, again, walking up the same path from the camp area, heading their way. She saw them standing there with their camera, and she just froze. Stopped dead in the middle of the path and stared at them. No wave, no nod, just staring. The husband leaned close to his wife, whispering, "I think we have a stalker." His wife looked, saw the woman standing there, unnervingly still, and that cold gut drop feeling hit her hard. This wasn't awkwardness. This felt intentional. They didn't wait. They picked up their pace, hiking quickly, trying to put distance between them and her. But every time they risked a glance back over their shoulders, she was still there, keeping pace. But she was always the same distance behind them, just far enough to be deeply unsettling. Finally, unnerved, they stopped, stepped off the trail slightly, pretending to adjust their packs, giving her plenty of room to pass them. She walked up and stopped too, right behind them. She didn't say a word. She didn't try to go around. She just stood there, waiting. Okay, now they were properly freaked out. This wasn't normal. This wasn't awkwardness. This felt like a predator sizing up their prey. They looked at each other, a silent agreement between them. They saw a sign for a shortcut loop that led back to the campground. Without a word, they turned and started walking quickly down the loop path. When the trail curved and they were out of her sight, they broke into a jog. They practically ran the last stretch back to the familiar clearing of the campground, and they burst out of the trees, heart racing, and they looked back. The trail behind them was empty. She was gone. Or at least, that's what they thought. Back in the relative safety of the camper, relief was huge, but it was mixed with growing unease. Who was this woman, and what did she want? They tried to piece it together, but nothing ever made sense. The day wore on, and as darkness fell, they hoped the strangeness was over. It wasn't. Later that evening, the wife went for another shower. When she came back, her eyes were wide. She was in there again, she said. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was with the two younger girls whose campsite she seemed to have commandeered. The wife couldn't help but overhear the girls talking and whispering anxiously to each other. It confirmed what the couple had suspected. The woman had just walked into their reserved spot one day and pinched a tent without asking, and refused to leave when they confronted her. The girls were scared of her, trying desperately to ditch her, making up fake dinner plans just to get away from her for a few hours. This painted an even darker picture. She wasn't just socially awkward, she was invasive, intimidating. That night, sleep didn't come easily. They lay there listening to the sounds of the forest, jumping at every snap of a twig. And around 3 a.m., it happened. The scream. Blood-curdling, terrified, right outside their camper door. Instinctively, the husband scrambled to the window, peeling back just a tiny edge of the curtain. And there she was, standing in the narrow path between campsites, bathed in cold moonlight, utterly still, staring directly at their camper. He froze, holding his breath, and through the tiny gap in the curtain, their eyes met. An intense, unblinking stare that seemed to bore right through him. It felt like an eternity passed in those few moments. Then slowly and deliberately she turned her head and calmly walked away, disappearing back into the shadows of the trees. He let the curtain fall, shaking, and poured himself a very stiff drink, and then went around checking every lock on the camper twice. Sleep was impossible now. The next day felt heavy with dread. Some people were scheduled to arrive and camp with them for the weekend, and maybe having more people around would help. Maybe she'd finally leave them the hell alone. Their friends pulled in, excited for the weekend. They barely started to unload their gear, hadn't even gotten out tent poles, when, bam, she appeared, out of nowhere again. Same routine. Can I pet your dogs? Same answer. No. Same unnerving, silent standing. Then her eyes landed on the friend's brand new tent, still packed up. Oh, she said, her voice flat. I have that one too. Before anybody could react, she walked over to the friend's gear, grabbed their hammer, and picked up a handful of their tent pegs. I'll help you set it up, she stated, not asked. The friends, bewildered, managed an awkward, no thanks man, I got it. But she didn't put the hammer down. She just stood there, holding it, staring at him. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threat. Then, just as suddenly as she had grabbed the tools, she dropped everything, hammer, pegs, clattering it on the ground, turned, and sprinted away into the trees full force, completely gone. The husband quickly filled in their friends on everything that had happened, the staring, the shower incident, the trail, the scream, and hearing it all laid out, everybody agreed this wasn't just a weird person anymore. This woman felt genuinely dangerous. That night, they stuck close together. They built a big fire and tried to create a zone of normalcy. Maybe that would keep the weirdness at bay with the numbers and the noise. After a few drinks, trying to unwind from the tension from the day, she came back, one last time. She walked right up to the edge of the firelight. Hey, she said, addressing the group, but her eyes seemed fixed on the husband. You guys seem to have extra room. Can I stay with you tonight? Then quieter, almost a suggestion, we could have a lot of fun together. The friend who owned the tent, maybe emboldened by the beer, let out a startled laugh. Whoa, did you just propose a gangbang? The woman didn't laugh though. She didn't even smile. Her expression didn't change. Instead, she turned her head slowly and locked eyes directly with the husband. A dark, intense, unblinking gaze, and said very deliberately, I like your friend. And with that, she turned around and melted back into the absolute darkness beyond the firelight. The air felt thick after she left. No one knew what to say. The offer was bizarre, unsettling, but the way she looked at the husband, like something else, a threat, a promise. They spent the rest of the night jumpy, listening to every sound from the woods. Later that night, someone in the group happened to glance over toward where the woman's small tent had been pinched. Near the girl's site, it was gone. Not packed up, destroyed. Gear was scattered everywhere, clothes, sleeping bags, remnants of trash, all strewn across the site as if in a violent rage. But the tent itself and the woman was nowhere to be found. They immediately went and found the park rangers, reporting everything that had happened over the past few days. The stalking, the weird behavior, the scream, the offer, and the destroyed campsite. The rangers took notes and seemed concerned and said they'd patrol the area and keep an eye out. But the woman, she had vanished. The remaining days of their 20-day honeymoon passed under a cloud of anxiety. Their friends left after a weekend, and the couple kept mostly to the camper and the dogs always on alert. But they saw no sign of her. Until their very last evening in the mountains, they decided to drive up to a scenic lookout point, a place they'd been meaning to visit to watch the sunset one last time, trying to salvage some peace from the trip. They parked, walked out to the edge, and the view was breathtaking. For a few minutes, the world felt calm and beautiful again. The wife had her camera out, zooming in on distant peaks, and as she scanned the tree line bordering the lookout area, she saw movement. Lowering the camera slightly, she focused. Somebody was just inside the woods, watching them. It was her. As they watched frozen, she stepped out of the trees. Slowly, deliberately, she walked up the gentle slope toward them. Didn't run. Didn't speak. Just walked until she reached the boulder sitting just a few yards away from them. She sat down facing the sunset, same as them. Silent, motionless, as if she belonged there. As if she hadn't terrified them for days. The woman leaned closer to her husband and whispered barely audibly, "Take a picture." He raised the camera, pretending to focus on the mountains beyond her, heart hammering. He angled it slightly, clicked the shutter, capturing her sitting on the rock, a still silent figure against the fading light. They didn't wait for the sun to fully set. They backed away slowly, got in their car, and drove down the mountain without looking. They never saw her again. Later, safe at home, they looked at the picture he took. And the strangest thing, she looked completely normal. Just a woman, maybe in her 20s, average build, plain clothes, unremarkable face. Nothing about the photo screamed danger or unhinged. But they knew better. To them, it wasn't a normal photo. It was a souvenir from a honeymoon nightmare. A chilling reminder of how quickly paradise can curdle in the paranoia. How the most beautiful, peaceful places can harbor the most unsettling human elements. Because the woods taught them a terrifying lesson. Sometimes, the scariest thing you find deep in the woods isn't a bear, or the darkness, or the thing you imagine watching from the shadows. Sometimes, it's the person sitting right beside you on a rock, looking almost human. Almost. Being watched is one thing. Being confronted, followed, screamed at in the dead of night, that's another level of fear entirely. What drives somebody to behave like that? We might never know. But that couple certainly won't forget their honeymoon. And if you think a silent woman on a mountainside is unnerving, imagine being deep in the woods, miles away from any road, only to stumble upon an abandoned church. And then, imagine hearing it start to sing in the middle of the night. That story is going to be the next episode posted here on the other side. So check it out here in the next few days. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye.